The 2022 NFL Draft is shaping up to be a little different than recent years, but one thing remains the same: the Jacksonville Jaguars making the first overall pick. If the Jags were drafting for need, they could certainly do a lot worse than Alabama left tackle Evan Neal, who could potentially protect the blind side for Trevor Lawrence for the foreseeable future. They could also bolster their pass rush with defensive ends Aiden Hutchinson or Kayvon Thibodeaux. As for who and when the first quarterback will come off the board, for now it looks like a debate between Matt Corral, Kenny Pickett, and Malik Willis out of Liberty. There are many teams drafting in the top 10 that may look in that direction. So who will stand pat or potentially trade up? As for the deepest positional group in the draft, if teams are looking for talented wideouts, there are plenty to choose from. You have the deep ball speedster Jamison Williams, the game-breaking duo out of Ohio State, Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, to go along with Treylon Burks, Drake London, Jahan Dotson, and George Pickens, who could all potentially hear their names called on day one. So who will make the biggest leap or potentially slide in the draft process? April 28th in Sin City. Can't get here soon enough.
All right, let's mock it up. We've got Chris Trapasso giving us a brand new first-round mock draft. Danny Kanell with us as well, going to give us his thoughts. As we start with Jacksonville at number 1, Chris, who do you have them going with?
Alabama offensive tackle Evan Neal. He might not be like the slam dunk top prospect in this draft class, but all you needed to do is watch some Jacksonville Jaguars games and see how frequently Trevor Lawrence was pressured this past season. He was only sacked 32 times, but he was under pressure almost half of his dropbacks. Evan Neal has the size, the length, the athleticism to eventually be that all-pro caliber at the left tackle position. Maybe not the best player, but a need for the Jaguars entering year 2 of Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, they've got to do something up front to help out their franchise quarterback, and I don't think they're going to go away the Bengals and get a wide receiver with this pick. And I agree with you, Chris. I think Evan Neal is probably the safest pick there. I love the athleticism he's thrown throughout his career. Started every game as a freshman at guard, then switched over to right tackle his sophomore year, started every game there, and then for his last season moved to left tackle. So there's a ton of versatility, and I think that speaks volumes to his athleticism and his ability to adjust. And it gives you a lot of flexibility with where to plug him in that offensive line with Jacksonville, which has a ton of spots up front in order to do a better job protecting Trevor Lawrence.
All right, Evan Neal, offensive tackle out of Alabama, number 1 to the Jaguars in Chris Trapasso's latest mock draft. At number 2, Chris, you have a Michigander, or at least somebody who went to college at Michigan, staying in that state.
Yeah, Aiden Hutchinson, the edge rusher from the Michigan Wolverines. He kind of feels like a Dan Campbell type. Like, he'll bite off some kneecaps if he needs to. I like, with Aiden Hutchinson, that he improved in each of his seasons in college. You saw some flashes as a sophomore and a junior, and then he completely erupted as a senior. He has an NFL defensive end frame, the length that you want, pass rushing moves, which are really important. I think he's a 3-down, 10-plus sack player right away, and the Lions only had 30 sacks as a team this past season, so that's a big need for them. This might be the best player in the draft. This would be a home run selection here at number 2 for the Lions.
From Plymouth, Michigan to Ann Arbor, and then maybe to Detroit, according to our Chris Trapasso. Moving on to number 3, Danny, Chris has the Texans taking Oregon edge Kayvon Thibodeaux, who before the season, sometimes during the season, even halfway through, was kind of an overwhelming number 1 prospect, but for the most part has slid down into somewhere between the 3 and 6 range.
So to me, it's the dreaded potential word with Kayvon Thibodeaux. I think he's incredibly talented. The raw potential is there, but where was the production? It was there sporadically, but he struggled with injuries, didn't play against Ohio State, which would have been a great film to get of him. And then you just didn't see the sack numbers that you would expect from somebody that's, was at one time thought to be the number 1 pick in the draft. He's also a unique character. When I say that, I wonder if the scouts are going to be asking the question, how much does he really love football? And if you're willing to bet $20 million on somebody, $20+ million on somebody, the answer better be, heck yes, he loves football. And I don't know if that's it. I mean, he was on there talking about why he chose Oregon because of the brand, not to win a championship. That to me is a red flag. And it's going to be just part of the process that takes place with Thibodeaux leading up to the draft. If he blows interviewers away with an attitude of how great he wants to be, and he could be, I think he could go as high as 1, but my hunch tells me you throw on the tape and you talk to him, and it's going to ding him a little bit even further down here.
Yeah, that was an eyebrow-raising interview he had with Joel Klatt during the national championship game a few weeks ago. All right, Danny, let's move on to number 4. We've got both New York teams, New Jersey teams, I guess, that have 2 top 10 picks. The Giants have 5 and 7. The Jets have 4 and 10. At number 4, Danny, Chris Trapasso has the Jets taking Notre Dame safety Kyle Hamilton.
Well, I hope they pass on him because I'd love for the Giants to get him. Kyle Hamilton might be one of my favorite players in the draft. He's tall, he's lanky, and I got a really good look at him that first game of the season when he played against Florida State and was all over the field. He's got everything you look for in today's NFL game. He's rangy. He can go with the longer wide receivers. He's flexible. He can go down and stop the run in the box. You can do a lot of different things with him, sort of a Swiss Army knife type player. And just the sheer athleticism and ball hawking skills are exactly what we do look for from the safety position. So I think this is a player. And don't forget either, he lost a couple games in the back end of the season dealing with the injury, which was, a tough loss for Notre Dame. But I don't think it'll impact his draft stock one bit. Whether it's the Jets here at 4 or if he drops to 5, I think he's a player that's going to be a Pro Bowl player for quite a long time.
All right, let's move over to the other New York, New Jersey team, the New York Giants. Chris, you have them starting the new Brian Daboll regime with an offensive tackle.
Yeah, Ike Ekwonu, the guard tackle from NC State. Some teams will have him inside. I think he can still play tackle. And at this point, it seems like with their new GM, Joe Shane, and Brian Daboll, they want to move forward with Daniel Jones. I don't know if I would do that, but we're trying to simulate what we think will ultimately happen. And Daniel Jones has not been in the best situation in New York. The receivers, the running backs have been injured, but up front have just not been very good, the blockers for him. Andrew Thomas has come along strong over the last season and a half, but there are a lot more pieces up front that have to be solidified. And Ike Ekwonu, compact, balanced, and powerful. I think he's ready to step in and be a high-level starter early in his NFL career.
All right, through the top 5 now, no quarterbacks until number 6. That's where the Carolina Panthers are drafting. And Danny, Chris has the Panthers taking quarterback out of Pittsburgh, Kenny Pickett.
Well, Chris, I haven't loved this quarterback class, but I'm in the same boat as Chris Trapasso here and having Kenny Pickett at the top of the group. All you have to do is throw on the tape. I mean, playing in Mark Whipple's system at Pitt, he was stretching the field vertically. You throw in the tape versus the better competition when he played against Clemson, when he went down to Tennessee. At any moment when they needed a big win, he stepped up big. He's able to stretch the field. He's got enough mobility to get around in today's NFL to escape pressure, which, he's going to probably have to do if he's in Carolina. I wish he was in a little bit more of a stable franchise. I know a lot of people are pegging him possibly to Pittsburgh to be Ben Roethlisberger's heir apparent if he drops that far. I do wonder if he can carry the load of a franchise that has struggled here over the past few years at the quarterback position to put the right pieces of puzzle around him. But I like Kenny Pickett a lot. Ton of football played under his belt. The IQ is there. Should be able to pick up the system pretty quick. So I like him. He's my QB1 of this class, too.
All right, first quarterback off the board there, number 6 to the Panthers, Kenny Pickett. Moving to number 7, it's the New York Giants. Chris, you had them going offense first and now over to the defensive side of the ball for their second top 10 pick.
Yeah, with LSU cornerback Derek Stingley. I think this would be the perfect mentorship for him to learn from one of the longer, more athletic corners in the league, James Bradberry, for a season. Bradberry's a free agent after next year. You let Derek Stingley and Bradberry team up to shore up the perimeters of that secondary for the Giants. And they're similar type players. Stingley is super athletic, great in those contested catch situations, had probably the best freshman season that we've ever seen from a cornerback at the college football level, winning that national title with Joe Burrow and company in 2019. He has all the traits to be an all-pro caliber type, and that's will be missing after James Bradberry's contract is up in New York unless they pick Derek Stingley here.
First cornerback off the board in Chris Trapasso's first-round mock, and now at number 8, the first wide receiver off the board. Danny, Chris has the Falcons taking Garrett Wilson, the wide receiver out of the Ohio State.
Yeah, this draft class for wide receiver, there's a bunch of guys that are kind of jockeying for this first position, and Jameson Williams might have hurt his stock, with the injury that he suffered in the championship game. I don't think he falls too far, but with that injury, I do think it vaults Garrett Wilson to the top of the heap here at 6 foot, 4.4 speed. He's a great route runner. He's able to pop the top of the secondary. He's polished. He's a student of the game. This is what you will look for in Atlanta, who, they've tried to figure out what are they doing with Matt Ryan? Is he coming back? Are they going to keep, the Matt Ryan experiment going? Well, one thing we know, if you give Matt Ryan the weapons that he needs, he can absolutely still sling it. So I think this is a solid selection right here. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if he's the first wide receiver taken. Coming out of Ohio State, you saw plenty of balls that he caught. The upside is there. I think this is one of those guys that can come in and have an impact his rookie year.
All right, one more year on Calvin Ridley's deal as well. He's going to make $11 million in the 22 season. Let's move on to the Broncos at 9. Chris, did you give any thought to maybe drafting a quarterback for the Broncos here?
Well, I think realistically, this will be a Packers selection because I think the Broncos, all signs are pointing to them trading for Aaron Rodgers with the hiring of former quarterbacks coach up there in Green Bay, Nate Hackett. But just for Broncos fans, wanted to give them a selection here in this mock draft. I think George Karlaftis, the edge rusher out of Purdue, makes a lot of sense to be in a pairing with Bradley Chubb for at least a season. And we don't really know what the future lies for Bradley Chubb there in Denver. Are they going to sign him to a long-term deal? Are they going to let him hit the open market? With George Karlaftis, you get a similar type player to what Bradley Chubb brings to the field. He's big, he's long, he's physical, he has an NFL caliber body, was a big recruit, and really looked like a first-round pick as early as his freshman season. After losing Von Miller, I think the Broncos still have a strong defense, but they like to be ferocious around the corners, and George Karlaftis can be that guy pairing next to Bradley Chubb.
And I think that would be awesome for him, who might be the most productive out of this trio of edge rushers that we just saw up there, Hutchinson, Thibodeau, and now Karlaftis. He is a freakish athlete with a 37-inch vertical, 4.6, 5.40 time. He's really honed in on his body, added a lot of weight, but kept his body fat down around 15%. Runs with a high motor. I wouldn't be surprised at all early in his career, especially playing across from Bradley Chubb, if the production is bigger than the two guys going ahead of him. So I like this pick for Denver.
All right, let's go to the New York Jets, their second pick of the top 10. Chris Trapasso had them taking Kyle Hamilton, the safety out of Notre Dame, at number 4. Who you have him taking at number 10?
Charles Cross, the offensive tackle from Mississippi State. I mean, we talked about Trevor Lawrence needing a blindside protector. Well, certainly Zach Wilson does too. He was sacked a bunch this past season. And even if Mekhi Becton returns from injury and plays how he did as a rookie, they need someone at that right tackle position that can shore up the edges of that unit. And Charles Cross is super smooth on film and was outstanding in the SEC this season. He's a younger prospect with a lot of upside.
All right, that's the top 10 in Chris Trapasso's latest mock draft. One quarterback in there. Panthers taking Kenny Pickett at number 6. Recapping that top 10 with Evan Neal at the very top, the offensive tackle out of Alabama, going to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Those two edge rushers, 2 and 3. And then the Jets taking Hamilton and Cross. The Giants going offensive tackle and cornerback. Just went through the first 10 picks of Chris Trapasso's latest NFL mock draft, with Evan Neal going number 1. Kenny Pickett, the first quarterback off the board, number 6 to the Carolina Panthers. Let's get into the teens, shall we? Chris Trapasso joins us. Danny Kanell is here as well. And at number 11, Washington. Looking at a quarterback. And Danny, Chris has him taking Malik Willis out of Liberty.
So I think Malik Willis is one of those quarterbacks that's just hard to judge. If you're looking for upside, I think it's clearly there. Like, raw athleticism is there. The film this year isn't great, but if you put in 2 years ago when he put Liberty on his back and carried them to a one-loss season, it was super impressive. Then against the better competition this year, he struggled a little bit against Ole Miss, against some of the ACC schools that he played against. Was a little bit turnover prone, but he didn't have the talent that was around him. Sounds a lot like what happened to Josh Allen when he was at Wyoming. The film wasn't great, but you just saw the potential jump off the film. Now, he's not as big at just 6'1", but he can run. He's a little over a 4.4. It'll be really fascinating to see what he runs at the combine. If a team like Washington, who's in the need for a quarterback, if they fall in love with somebody they've been seeing in their backyard, it wouldn't surprise me. All it takes is one team He's not the second quarterback I have, but man, the upside is there. Wouldn't surprise me if some team falls in love with him, like Washington, taking him at this spot.
Yeah, Danny, I totally agree with the parallels between Malik Willis and Josh Allen in terms of their collegiate careers. And I think Ron Rivera, the Washington football team head coach, is going to play a big role here. That you're right, Malik Willis is not as big as Josh Allen. He's not as big as Cam Newton, but there are similar styles with how they run the football, the big arms. I think Rivera will see almost a smaller version of Cam Newton, who was pretty raw entering the NFL in 2011. And that's kind of why I leaned in that direction instead of a Sam Howell or a Desmond Ridder or a Matt Corral at this pick.
All right, second quarterback off the board. There will be more as I peek ahead into the latter stage of this first round from Chris Trapasso. But moving to number 12, Chris, it's the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, Andrew Booth, the cornerback from Clemson, is the pick here. Our very own Patrick Peterson is a free agent. Mackenzie Alexander is a free agent in that secondary. And I know that during the Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman era, the Vikings invested a lot in this cornerback position, but it is certainly a need moving into the 2022 season. You can certainly add some pieces offensively on day 2 and day 3, but you have your quarterback in Kirk Cousins. You have your superstar in Justin Jefferson. The line's good. You have Dalvin Cook. They need to be better stopping the pass. And Andrew Booth was a big recruit, 5 interceptions over the past 2 seasons at Clemson. He glides around the football field and has some of the best highlight reel interceptions I've ever seen. So this is a pick that may not be super sexy, but it's really what the Vikings need here.
All right, coming up at 13, the Cleveland Browns, who are looking at the Super Bowl and saying, boy, well, why didn't we get that version of Odell Beckham Jr. with us in Cleveland? Chris, you have them looking at a wide receiver in the draft.
Yeah, Treylon Burks, the wide receiver from Arkansas. If you watch the Browns this year, they weren't really a big yards after the catch team. That Jarvis Landry could do a little bit of that earlier in his career, now into his 30s. That's not really his game. They have Donovan Peoples-Jones and Anthony Schwartz, who are kind of take the lid off the defense types. They need someone like Treylon Burks that can take an RPO slant and hit a 50-yard touchdown, breaking in a few tackles. There's a lot of A.J. Brown to his game, and I like that he's not only good after the catch, but he plays to his frame. He's about 6'3", 220 pounds, can play above the rim and rebound the football down the field. In that 5th-year contract, final season of Baker Mayfield's rookie deal, I want to see the Browns get him another weapon, and Treylon Burks was one of my favorite players to watch in the SEC.
Second wide receiver off the board in Chris Trapasso's mock draft. Number 1 wide receiver was Garrett Wilson, who went number 8 to the Falcons. Let's move on to number 14. It's the Baltimore Ravens, just missing the playoffs. Danny, Chris has them going with secondary help in Cincy defensive back Ahmad Gardner.
Yeah, Sauce Gardner is one of my favorite players coming out. Had a fantastic career at Cincinnati. The only thing he was missing really was that kind of big interception number. That's because no one wanted to throw his way. At 6'3", 200 pounds, he's tall, he's lanky, and that's always, as a quarterback, you're always looking for a mismatch on the outside. When you see a 6'3" corner, you might have a 6'3", 6'4" wide receiver. You're probably going to go the other way automatically just because you're looking for that size mismatch, and you cannot find it with him. Can come off the edge in a corner blitz like this video here. He's a very smart football player who's handled a lot in a pretty complex scheme at Cincinnati. The jump to the next level shouldn't be a challenge for him in a ball-hawking secondary like Baltimore would like to see. I think it makes a lot of sense from both sides, so I like this pick a lot.
All right, let's move on to the Philadelphia Eagles, who have a bunch of picks here in the teens. They have 15, 16, and 19. And at 15, I would think that Philadelphia would be pretty happy if Tyler Linderbaum slid to them this far. Danny, we've seen a lot of mocks where Tyler Linderbaum not only goes top 10, but knocks on the door of the top 5.
Yeah, and that's where I think this is a little bit lower. I actually think he'll go higher than this as well. Evan Neal is all the rage because of his flexibility of the position he plays. But Linderbaum's film is like offensive line porn when you put it on. He's just mauling dudes left and right. He's playing it at an offensive line factory there in Iowa. And Chris, I know you'll appreciate this as you watch their bowl game against Clemson. He's a player, not against Clemson, against Kentucky. When he came back in the game, he was injured. Everybody thought it was going to be a Matt Corral moment. Oh, here he goes. He might have gotten hurt. And a lot of players would have come out of that game. This is a football player, a mean, nasty offensive lineman, which is exactly what you want as a character trait and somebody blocking for both the run and the pass up front.
Yeah, and even though he is going to be a top 15 pick more than likely, he waited until the last minute to say he was going to the NFL draft. There was part of him that wanted to come back for another year of college. Eagles have back-to-back picks here. Chris, who do you have them taking then at 16?
David Ojabo, the edge rusher out of Michigan. Now, he was a huge beneficiary of a lot of scouts' eyes watching Aiden Hutchinson along that Michigan defensive line this season. I think he's someone that you can tell is pretty raw because he's relatively new to the game of football, but has that all-pro caliber upside. He's super bendy around the corner. There's some moments where he shows some pass rushing moves. And the Eagles have Derek Barnett hitting free agency, Brandon Graham coming off a pretty serious injury late in his career. Ryan Kerrigan is older as well. So the Eagles and Howie Roseman address the offensive line and then the defensive line with back-to-back picks.
All right, and then they have another pick coming up at 19. But first things first, we got the Chargers at 17. Chris, who do you have them taking?
Kaiir Elam, the cornerback out of Florida, and I'm really interested in Danny's thoughts on this cornerback. Similar to Sauce Gardner, that he's a bigger on-an-island press man cornerback. He can be a little bit grabby down the field, but when you look at the Chargers secondary right now, with Chris Harris hitting free agency, getting near the end of his career, it's not really a group that has that big, overwhelming physical presence. I loved Asante Samuel last season, and I think to have Kaiir Elam and Asante Samuel Jr. as the two outside cornerbacks, they could match up with any type of size at the receiver position. So Kaiir Elam shoring up that secondary and then eventually addressing the offense for Justin Herbert later in the draft.
Yeah, he's got the football gene in his blood with his uncle, Matt Elam, already had been, an impressive player at the next level as well. His ball skills are outstanding. He was a great athlete. A lot of these guys you see play wide receiver earlier in their careers. He was one of those as well, but he's still got enough ball skills to make the play on the football when he gets around it. I'm a big fan of guys that are taller, like 6'2", is plenty of skill, plenty of height and length to go with the longer players at the next level that he's going to face. So I'm even though he's a Gator, I'm still a big fan of his style of play.
It's an interesting position in the first round of the mock because you have teams like the Ravens and Eagles and Chargers who are thinking, okay, we can win next year. And then at 18, you have the Saints who are maybe in a total rebuild here. They don't know who their quarterback's going to be. Sean Payton is gone. Chris, who do you have them taking?
I have them picking Matt Corral, the quarterback out of Ole Miss. And we don't even know who their head coach is going to be, but I figured whoever takes the reins on the sidelines there will want his quarterback. Could they bring back Jameis Winston on a cheap deal? That's a possibility, but I think they would want some young talent at the game's most vital position. I like Matt Corral. I like his development, that he went from 14 interceptions in 2020 to only 5 this past season. And if we're watching these NFL playoffs, we're seeing the improvisation ability, the arm talent showcased by Patrick Mahomes, by Joe Burrow, by Josh Allen. Matt Corral's not really to that level, but he has that kind of style. He's a very tough runner. The athleticism is there. He was a big dual threat recruit coming into Ole Miss. I think right in the middle of round 1 seems like the best spot for him.
Yeah, is it fair to call him like a poor man's Patrick Mahomes? Because I don't think the upside is there to be like a generational player, but you see a lot of the similar skill sets, and he actually runs the ball way more than Patrick Mahomes did in college. I mean, I go back and look at the Tennessee game where I think he had 22 carries for almost 200 yards on the ground, and it really took its toll on him. And he stayed, he kept playing, but he's a tough physical quarterback. But just the way he extends plays, can stretch it vertically. He'll alter the arm angles, much like you see Mahomes and Josh Allen do. He just doesn't have the upside that those two guys do, which are two stars of the league. But it's not to say that somebody couldn't develop into a franchise quarterback. I'd be a little bit more concerned going to the Saints with all the question marks there, whether it was Corral or any one of these other quarterbacks, because I don't know if any one of them are good enough to just lift the level of play around them up early. They're going to need a support staff around them, sort of like you saw Mac Jones go to the Patriots, where you're in a solid franchise. It can really help that transition. If you go to a franchise that's a mess, I worry it could derail any one of these quarterbacks' careers. And that would be my worry for Matt Corral if he went to the Saints.
All right, the Eagles are up again at 19. Chris, you had them going offensive line and defensive line at 15 and 16. What are they doing here?
Linebacker Nakobe Dean from Georgia. Now, Howie Roseman has been very much against picking linebackers early during his time as the Eagles GM. But now's the time to do it because Nakobe Dean would be sitting in their lap. He is the modern day linebacker. He's a little smaller, but I'm totally okay with that. He's fluid in coverage. We saw during the college football playoff how instinctive he is, reading plays, sniffing out screens. And he's a great blitzer too. He plays a lot bigger than being kind of a shorter, smaller linebacker. And that's totally fine in today's NFL to not be 6'2" and 250 pounds. Was the leader of that Georgia defense at the second level, and it's just a position of need in Philadelphia. They need that quarterback of the defense, and Nakobe Dean has been that at Georgia for the past 3 seasons.
All right, and Pittsburgh. Wrong AFC North team. The Pittsburgh Steelers. So Amanda had something playing on her computer, and it kind of threw me off. Doing my first show with the Invisalign in. I've got a lot going on. Pittsburgh Steelers coming up at number 20 here, guys. And Danny, Chris has the Steelers taking Desmond Ridder, the quarterback out of Cincinnati. That's why I was thinking Cincy.
And my jaw dropped when I saw this pick. This one will surprise me, but I have been surprised before at teams that reach for quarterbacks. Clearly, Pittsburgh needs a plan. They need an heir apparent. I do think they need to take a quarterback. If, the other 3 are off the board already, then you kind of drop to this place, and it's Desmond Ridder. Now, I have a feeling they'll all drop, but the trend has been over the last decade that quarterbacks are overdrafted, not underdrafted, so it wouldn't surprise me at all. Desmond Ridder's a player who's a winner. I mean, that's one of the bigger compliments you can pay to somebody at Cincinnati. As a multi-year starter, he's won, culminating in a season when he got to the playoffs. But he's bigger than I think people realize at 6'4". He can still add a little bit to his frame. But the film, I don't think, is spectacular. You do see him get locked in on some targets. The accuracy that is just not there. Again, sounds kind of like a Josh Allen, but he was playing with more talent around him where I thought he could have been more efficient as a passer, a little bit more of a dangerous deep threat down the field. Where he was asked to be, though, was a game manager, and he did an exceptional job at that. So I'll be surprised if Desmond Ridder is a first-round pick, but I have been surprised before where a lot of these quarterbacks have been taken.
So my thought process behind this selection was that the Steelers GM Kevin Colbert has been there for Ben Roethlisberger's career, and Ben Roethlisberger was a multi-year starter who won a lot of games at a school outside the Power 5 conference. And that's what you get with Desmond Ridder, that, like Danny said, he's won a lot of football games. He understands and is okay, willing to accept being that game manager. I don't know if they would ask him to be the week 1 starter guaranteed. They have some other veterans on the roster that were backing up Ben Roethlisberger. I just think that they would like the experience, and that Desmond Ridder does give you some of that improvisation, scrambling ability that we're seeing in this new trend of young quarterbacks at the NFL level.
All right, 20 picks into Chris Trapasso's latest first-round mock on CBSSports.com. I want to recap the picks from 11 to 20 with a couple of quarterbacks and 3 picks for the Philadelphia Eagles. They go offensive line, defensive line, and Nakobe Dean, linebacker help as well. The quarterbacks, Malik Willis to Washington at 11, Desmond Ridder to Pittsburgh at number 20.
Taking a look at Chris Trapasso's latest mock draft, we are working our way through it this hour. This is what they just did, 11 through 20 there. Washington taking a quarterback in Malik Willis. Also at the bottom, you see the Steelers taking a quarterback as well in Desmond Ridder. The Eagles were loaded 11 through 20. They're having 3 picks there, back-to-back picks of 15 and 16, getting Jalen Hurts in protection. And Tyler Linderbaum, also 16, with the top edge rushers in the draft in David Ojabo. Let's welcome back Chris Trapasso and Danny Kanell. Working our way, let's pick up with the Patriots at 21. Chris has them taking Utah linebacker Devin Lloyd. This is somebody who could have gone in the draft last year. I had a chance to talk to him, says, I wanted to go back. I wanted to get better. I wanted to learn how to be a leader. Danny, what are your thoughts on this pick?
Amanda, I love this. I think this is a steal for Bill Belichick and the Patriots if he goes here. And it's a player who's been skyrocketing up most draft boards through the middle part of the season. I saw him jump in here. We were doing one of Ryan Wilson's mocks a couple months ago, and he crept in at 32 and really started paying attention to the back end of the season. And he's a player who just makes plays. He's smart. He's long. Again, that's a theme I go with. You see the trend of the NFL. It's not bigger, stronger, faster. It's longer, stronger, faster to keep up with a lot of these wide open, pass-happy schemes. And Devin Lloyd is a very versatile player. He's always around the football, just has a knack for making plays that I think you would see Bill Belichick have an absolutely heyday with at the Mike linebacker position. So he's one of my favorite players, and I'll be surprised actually if he goes this low the Patriots. If he does, I don't think there's any chance they pass on him.
Yeah, I've been looking through a couple mock drafts, seeing him go within the first top 15. Let's go to the Raiders at 22. Chris, you have them taking Washington cornerback Trent McDuffie. Pete Prisco calmed down this past season. Their defense improved a little bit, but there are definitely still flaws.
Yeah, definitely. I think at this point, with Josh McDaniels there in Las Vegas and Derek Carr, all the weapons they have offensively, they're good on that side of the ball. But the cornerback position has been a little bit of a problem with Damon Arnett, everything that transpired off the field with him, obviously no longer on the team. They have Trayvon Mullen and not a lot else at the cornerback position. And Trent McDuffie, coming from that Washington program that puts a lot of high caliber defensive backs into the NFL, Budda Baker, Elijah Molden, Marcus Peters. This would be a very prudent pick for the Raiders at the start of the Josh McDaniels era.
Cardinals have the 23rd overall pick. Chris has them taking Ohio State wide receiver Chris Olave. Danny, DeAndre Hopkins went down late in the season. You have Christian Kirk about to hit free agency. They can decide what to do with A.J. Green. So is this a good move for them?
Absolutely. You mentioned all the reasons. We saw what a shell Kyler Murray was when he lost DeAndre Hopkins. They've got to have depth at that position, so it makes a ton of sense. And going with Chris Olave makes a ton of sense, too. He's a player, again, much like you were saying, Devin Lloyd came back. He probably could have left, but he saw a rich wide receiver class last year, came back, wanted to improve his stock, and that's exactly what he did. Very fluid route runner with great hands, catches almost anything thrown in his vicinity. He's got great acceleration, getting off the ball, getting up to his top speed, can pop the top off. Just has a knack for getting open. The feel that he had with C.J. Stroud this year was something to behold, and I think he'll get that pretty quickly with Kyler Murray, should he go here at this spot too. He could add a little bit of bulk, a little bit more physicality to his game, but that'll come with getting in a program, being a full-time pro. I think that'll come.
Got the Cowboys at 24. Chris, you're going with Alabama wide receiver Jameson Williams. I feel like we're not even talking about his injury because nobody seems concerned about that. This sort of feels like the CeeDee Lamb pick from a couple years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the thought behind this, that everyone was surprised that CeeDee Lamb was falling in that 2020 draft, and the Cowboys were happy to stop that fall. I think the same thing could happen in April, that Jameson Williams catapulted himself into the first round after transferring from Ohio State with a breakout season, a lot of big plays, great route running, catching passes from Bryce Young at Alabama this season. And you look at the Cowboys roster, defensively they're pretty good, have a lot of young pieces and stars on that side. They're going to lose Michael Gallup on the offensive side of the ball. They would really only have CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper as the premier wideouts catching passes from Dak Prescott. So I think with Jameson Williams, you get someone that has a similar style to another Alabama wide receiver in Jerry Jeudy, that he's good down the field and can create separation. Let's just keep as many weapons around Dak Prescott as possible in Dallas.
All right, we have our third wide receiver going in a row. Chris has the Bills with the 25th overall pick, taking USC's Drake London there. Danny, Ryan Wilson in one of his mock drafts called him one of the only bright spots for USC. I feel like that will not be the case next season. But what do you think about the Bills taking Drake London?
Yeah, and he was hurt, a lot too. So that kind of was another bleak part of USC's season. I expect to turn around too, Amanda, as much as I know you probably won't enjoy that. But we shall see. Drake London is a physical specimen at 6'5". Some of the things you read about him where he's not the most, he's not the greatest route runner, struggles a little bit flexibility. It reminds you of stuff they said about DK Metcalf when he was coming out of Ole Miss. And you all of a sudden started to see him go viral. And there were people that questioned his route running ability too. And you saw how he could dominate NFL defensive backs just because of the sheer size. He is a walking mismatch. He's not quite that specimen with much bulk, but the size is there to be able to have that sort of impact. So I like the spot where he's going here. And again, another one where I think we've seen this one run of wide receivers. This is one who might go higher than this once people see him, working out, see him healthy, seeing him running routes, and they get to stand next to him and see what a physical presence he is. I wouldn't be surprised if Drake London goes a little bit higher, but I love the spot for him, man. With Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen throwing the ball to him and Stephon Diggs on the other side, he could have a massive rookie season for the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, by all means, they want to get back to where they were this season and a little bit beyond that. They need some help. You think about it, they felt like they didn't need help, and there they are. All right, let's go to the Titans at 26. Chris, this is somebody who I feel like we hadn't heard a lot about toward the end of the season, but more and more as we get closer to the draft, I'm hearing this guy's name a lot.
Yeah, Bernard Raymond, the offensive tackle from Central Michigan. He's making waves already in the first day of practice down there in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. A former tight end who moved to the offensive tackle position, 6'7", has gained weight in each of his seasons playing on the line. The athleticism is there, like Danny has mentioned. That length is so important at other positions. It certainly matters at the offensive tackle spot. And for the Titans, if you have Derrick Henry and you want to use the play action game with Ryan Tannehill and get it out quickly to A.J. Brown and his other targets, you need to have a good offensive line. I think that held back the Tennessee Titans a little bit this season. Will it take Raymond a year or two to acclimate to the NFL level? Probably, but the upside is there at 6'7" and around 300 pounds with a good athleticism and balance that allowed him to start his career at tight end before moving to offensive tackle.
All right, guys, hang on just a second. We'll pick back up after a very quick break starting at 27 there, but recapping what we saw 11 through 26 here. Devin Lloyd going to the Patriots. Danny says double thumbs up. He absolutely loves that pick. In fact, he said he'd be surprised if the Patriots found him at 21. But again, great pick there. We see 3 wide receivers go back to back to back. Chris Olave, Jameson Williams, and Drake London as well. Welcome back into CBS Sports HQ, taking a look at Chris Trapasso's latest mock draft. This is the draft order that we're about to dive into, starting with the Bucs at 27, finishing up with the Lions at 32. Of course, a lot of questions when it comes to teams like the Bucs. A whole bunch of players about to hit free agency. The Packers, will they not have Aaron Rodgers once the season begins? Welcome back, Chris Trapasso and Danny Kanell. So let's start with the Bucs at 27. Chris has them taking Texas A&M offensive lineman Kenyon Green. Danny, what do you think about this?
Solid selection, too, in a position that they need to address. I mean, we saw when Tristan Wirfs got hurt and they were lacking severe depth on the offensive line. It really impacted Tom Brady's play. Now without Tom Brady, whether it's Kyle Trask or somebody else, they're going to have to shore it up front. And Kenyon Green fits a lot of different positions, played 4 different positions across the offensive line at Texas A&M where he really excelled in the run game, which is why I do think in the interior at the guard position is where he'll end up in the NFL. He's got great agility, great quickness getting off the ball. You can work on the pass set skills, especially at the guard again, which is where you can get some help from the center or your tackle next to you. But I like this selection for the Bucs, a player who at times has been pegged as a top 15 pick. I think makes a lot of sense here. Smart player too, playing in Jimbo Fisher's system at A&M. It's not easy to be an offensive lineman there, and I think he's got a lot of potential here coming up.
Yeah, and the Buccaneers have Ryan Jensen and Alex Kappa, 2 of their full-time starters ready to hit free agency. So whether it is Kyle Trask or, like Danny said, another quarterback, I like the guard position. I do think, though, even though they picked Kyle Trask, the quarterback from Florida, on day 2 last year, if one of these big-name guys falls, if Malik Willis falls, if Matt Corral falls, I think their GM will think about rolling the dice to have more talent at the quarterback position, because we know before Tom Brady, it was kind of an issue. That spot was holding back this team from being as good as they show they could be in 2020.
Let's go to the Packers at 28. As I mentioned coming into this, we have no idea what's going to happen to Aaron Rodgers. So at this point, you're like, hey, here's another weapon for you. Chris, you have them taking Penn State wide receiver Jahan Dotson. Why is that?
Yeah, I don't care who the quarterback is, and I'm sure Aaron Rodgers would kind of scoff at the idea that if he leaves and then the Packers pick a wide receiver in the first round, finally be pretty mad about that. But Jahan Dotson is an electric player from in the slot, very fast down the football field. I think he's quick enough to create separation underneath. Yards after the catch is certainly a plus to his game. And just watching that Packers playoff game, force feeding the football to Davante Adams, which is usually a good idea. But once you get into those January games against top defenses, you have to spread around the wealth in the passing game. So whether it's Aaron Rodgers or Jordan Love, let's get Davante Adams a running mate in Jahan Dotson. That's kind of a younger Randall Cobb. We know that experiment didn't really turn out as well as the Packers wanted. I love Jahan Dotson's film. I think he's one of the safest slot receivers in this draft class.
Dolphins via the 49ers at 29. Chris has them taking Northern Iowa offensive tackle Trevor Penning. Chris, I know this is somebody our guys are really looking forward to watching at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, he just measured in yesterday at 6'6" and 330 pounds. Like, he's the guy they say you want someone to get off the bus that's going to intimidate the opposing team, that's going to be Trevor Penning. And the Dolphins have certainly invested a lot up front, even before the start of the Tua Tagovailoa era. But since he's arrived, they've put a lot of resources there with kind of mixed results and not the best results, to be honest. So they need to add, whether it be a tackle or a guard. I go with the tackle here in Trevor Penning, that, like Bernard Raymond, a smaller school player that has upside because of his size, his balance, and his power in the run game.
Chiefs at 30. We all know their defense needs to reassess a little bit after that AFC Championship loss. Danny, you should feel pretty good about this. Florida State edge rusher Jermaine Johnson. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
2 thumbs up, Amanda. Let's go. It's a Florida State Seminole. I love it. I do. I was really pumped to see him in the first round. He's a player who really excelled when he came over to Florida State from Georgia, where we saw all the talent on that defense. It was one of the reasons he didn't get to play. So he comes to Tallahassee. And I'll say this, Amanda, from before the time he stepped on the field, when he stepped on campus, the coaches were raving about his intangibles, the work ethic, the leadership abilities, and just his desire to want to get out there and prove to everybody what he's capable of. So I think you're getting a player with a chip on his shoulder. And then you had the season that he had, which matched the effort. Like, you saw the production was there. I do think he's a player who could get a little bit bigger, sometimes gets a little bit exposed against some of the bigger offensive linemen that he plays against. But as a sheer pass rusher, I think he can flat out crush it for Kansas City. I think it makes a ton of sense considering the way that you got to stop the quarterbacks nowadays. I love this selection going to a franchise like Kansas City. Love to see it.
Congratulations to you, Danny. That's all we want here is for you to be happy. Let's go to the Bengals at 31. Chris, how do they get even better when it comes to the draft?
They go defensive line because Larry Ogunjobi, who got hurt in that earlier playoff game, and B.J. Hill, who had that game-changing interception in the AFC title game, they're both free agents. And Devontae Wyatt, the defensive tackle from Georgia, to me, the clear-cut best interior pass rusher in this draft class. It's not that strong at that position in this class, but Devontae Wyatt wreaked havoc. Didn't matter who he was playing, on the road, at home. I know Jordan Davis, the big mammoth nose tackle, got a lot of the publicity, but you turn on the film, you see a quick first step from Devontae Wyatt, good power because he's built a little bit lower to the ground. There's great leverage there. And yes, the Bengals could maybe go offensive line, but at this point, with none of the top guys available, they shore up the interior of their defensive line with Devontae Wyatt.
All right, finally at 32, we find the Lions via the Rams. Of course, the Rams gave up pretty much all of their picks for the next couple of years to get to the point where they are, which would be the Super Bowl. And Danny, we know that Georgia defense is good, and that is where Chris is headed with the Lions at 32.
Yeah, Lewis Seen is one of the hardest hitting safeties you've seen in a couple years. He just flies around, really comes up great in run support, really strikes terror in opposing wide receivers. They come across the middle. So much so, it gets him in trouble sometimes with the targeting penalties that were called against him. But it was just, there was a ton of violence around the game, which is great. What you want to see at the safety position. I do think he'll probably more of a box type safety that'll come down and run support, can get exposed sometimes in the pass game. But you talk about a football player who's a little bit of old school mindset in him. Lewis Seen fits the definition of that.
All right, Danny, Chris, thank you guys so much for joining us. It is that time. We're going to do this at least once a week at this point until the draft in April. We appreciate it. Taking a look at 27 through 32 there, starting with the Bucks, filling a need and getting a great guy with Kenyon Green there, finishing with Lewis Seen, going to the Lions at 32. Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.